Hello guys, I'm Mike from Motorbike Mad. I'm here with Colin. Have a great interview today, hopefully. And it's a question of finding out the backstory behind businesses. What Motorbike Mad is about is stories, telling stories. So it's important to find out why people do what they do. So, Colin, why do you do what you do?
That's a very good question, isn't it? And I say it's not an easy one to answer, if I'm honest. There are many mornings when I wake up and think, why the hell am I doing this? But yeah, I mean, working for Motorcycle Action Group, I've always said it's an honour and a privilege as opposed to a form of employment. So what I get to do and get paid to do is something that I'm really passionate about. And it might sound cheesy, but it's actually, that's a heartfelt from me, from my experience, my history, in life through work and everything. What I was doing wasn't giving me any kind of satisfaction. So when the job came up, or the vacancy came up at MAG, I leapt at it and jumped in with both feet. And I've never looked back, I'm glad to say.
Because to a certain degree, if you do a job that you are passionate about, it's not like going to work. So it's not necessarily about going in and earning the wage to earn money. It's almost like a cause, a passion, so is that how you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, you're never going to be able to say, I got into this for the money. Because, don't get me fair, I'm paid very well for what I do, and I'm eternally grateful. But I'm always conscious of the fact that effectively my salary comes from the membership fees of people. So I feel an awful lot of pressure on my shoulders to actually deliver for the people that I represent. But yeah, again, it's this weird situation where I get to do something I really enjoy. Obviously, I was with MAG as a volunteer, as a regional rep, as a political rep, doing all the kind of things that I'm doing now. But now I'm doing it at a higher level, at the national level, and conveniently getting paid for it. So yeah, I don't have to do all my work in the evening. I can do some of it during the day.
No, that's brilliant, because you say you start off as a volunteer, which is admirable. When you go into the volunteer sector, there's got to be something in it for you. Okay, it's not just a question of doing something nice for someone else. So what do you get out of it as a person?
It's a difficult one to explain. Like I say, if you look at it on a purely logical level, the answer is probably not enough. But if you look at it from the level of passion, what I get out of it, what it makes of me as a human being, it's immense. I mean, what I'm doing is something that I can put on a CV. Not that I need a CV because I'm not looking for a job, but I can effectively say, yeah, I've learned to do things that I would never have got exposure to in any other line of work. Sitting down with MPs, sitting down with government ministers, top level officials, not everybody in the world gets to say that. And it's interesting when you actually start doing it, you actually then really get to see behind the scenes, shall we say, on their side of the table, shall we say. You see that they are all human beings, but probably I'm getting more satisfaction out of it than they are.
Yeah, because when we were talking earlier, you was talking about, shall we say, the lack of knowledge some of the people in positions of power should have. So that's quite enlightening for you to realise that actually you become quite an authority on it, become quite an expert. So using that expert knowledge, how do you think you can push MAG forward to actually install some of the things you're trying to do?
It is difficult because, I mean, obviously my makeup, the way that I think is that if you provide a logical, reasoned argument for something, the person on the other side of the table should just understand that and accept it, and it should be logical. There shouldn't be any argument or question. The reality is that, yes, you do all that work, you give them the statistics, you give them the evidence, you make the case. They can sit there and agree with you and say, you're absolutely right, Colin, absolutely agree with everything that you say. Motorcycles, they are going to help to reduce congestion. We can solve the safety issues if we really try. They're less polluting, save space. All these arguments that you make, they're absolutely right, but we're not going to do it. And that's the problem, is that it also needs a political will. As well as a logical argument, you've got to have the political will. And that political will comes from a broad membership base that are lobbying their MPs and saying, you need to listen to this argument. Because if they don't see any reason to accept the argument, all the logic in the world means nothing. They're counting votes.
Because the trouble is, you're right, they are counting votes because they don't empathise. They've never been in that environment. And unfortunately, it comes down to a tick box exercise, and it becomes down to money rather than actually putting the value on human lives, putting the value on the logistics behind the efficiency on the transport system, the safety. They seem to forget about when you get a rider that gets injured, what's the cost to the government to keep that person going, hospital and rehab. All those are unwritten costs. But, it seems like they just skip over the issue because it's cheaper just to nod and say, yes, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you need to be careful not to get a downer on the people who are making these decisions also. You have to realise they are human, and very often ignorance is a difficult word to use, but I'm using it in its purest sense, is that they do not understand. Until you explain something to them, they really do not understand what it is that you're talking about. And you literally, I've gone into meetings where I've had to explain to transport planners that a motorcycle is not just half a car. It's not a car with two less wheels. And until they actually, you say it and you think, oh, this is stupid, I can't be saying this, is this the best you can do, Colin? But unfortunately, you see the recognition dawn on their faces. We are dealing with something different. We know it's different, but we've got a one-size-fits-all policy for all motorised vehicles. And it's only when you actually get them to stop and think, that's when you can actually get across the board, and it then helps you to actually make the logical arguments. But very often it can be, I wouldn't say ideological, but it can be politically led. So obviously if somebody from the Green Party was sitting across the table from me, I would have a really hard job to explain to them why they need to promote motorcycling, because they've just stuck into this, motorcycles are dirty, noisy, polluting things. That's not what we want. They won't accept that they're not as dirty, noisy and polluting as cars, even though logically they understand that. It's still, yes, we just look at this monolith of all motorised vehicles being bad. So you've got to be a bit of a chameleon in terms of how you present the arguments to get through to different people. So it's a difficult job, and like I say, it's not something that most people get experience of doing.
But the main thing that they are missing, a motorcycle may have two wheels instead of four, but you're far more vulnerable because you haven't got this big sheet of metal cage around you. So it's that vulnerability which they seem to be overlooking all the time. And it's a vulnerability which you're obviously championing just to make sure everyone's safer.
Yeah, I mean, the vulnerability argument is always, again, it's a bit of a weird one because, say, my personal position on it is I don't particularly like being referred to as vulnerable. It makes me feel weak. It makes me feel, somebody who needs support. Whereas obviously just big roughy tufty bikers, we can look after ourselves, can't we? But the reality is, in the context that you have in those conversations with the policymakers, that's not what the argument about is whether, as you say, as a motorcyclist, you are exposed, you've not got a metal cage around you. If there is a collision, you're the one who's going to come off worse. The problem is that, again, with things like Vision Zero, although they recognise, yes, we need to promote safer roads for vulnerable road users, they've also tied it to, yes, we also need to promote active travel. And motorcycles falls through the gap again because we're not considered active travel. So although we're vulnerable, we're not the favoured vulnerable road users, and therefore get overlooked when it comes to the policy decisions. So there's a whole host of reasons and difficulties why it is to get this through to people who've never ridden motorcycles. The old adage, if I had to explain, you wouldn't understand kind of thing. that adage exists for a good reason.
But, understand that you don't know what you don't know. That's perfectly obvious. But it seemed very biased towards cyclists compared to motorcyclists. The cyclists are getting cycle paths. They seem to get more priority with resources, more priority with consideration than motorcycles. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And again, it does come down to, unfortunately, when it comes to road safety, the Vision Zero principles that are promoted by everybody in the road safety community, rather than looking at it being, although they pay lip service at, it's road safety for everybody, the reality is they've got favoured choices. favoured outcomes. So they actually want to push people down a route of going cycling, walking and public transport. Those are the favoured modes of transport. If you don't fit in that box, then really we're not here to deal with you. Although we understand logically that we've got to make the point that these are human beings. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to follow through when they say, well, what can we do to improve motorcycling? So for cycling, what you see is billions and billions of government money put into cycling infrastructure. To be fair, some level of education and training for cyclists, it is there, bikeability and all this kind of stuff. But with motorcycling, it's flipped the other way around. So it's all about, well, you're the problem. We've got to make you a better biker so that you can be safer, rather than, well, what can we actually do to change the infrastructure to make the road safer for you? So things like access to bus lanes. Cyclists have had default access to bus lanes since bus lanes were invented. As far as I'm aware, there was never any question that this was going to be the case. There was never any trials that I can see to check whether or not it was safe for cyclists. But then when you say, well, can we have, as motorcyclists with the same vulnerabilities, can we have access to the bus lanes? It's, well, we need to run a trial to make sure it's safe. But you've got the cyclists in there. What risks do they not face that we do face? You know, all this, turning left across your path and all this, it happens to cyclists as well, doesn't it? But that's not a problem because we like cyclists. They're the favoured mode of transport. So unfortunately, you do get this awkward situation where this mindset is so embedded, it is baked in, and getting over that is a hard uphill job. And the only way that we're going to do it, unfortunately, is by making a bit of noise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And from my own perspective, I found that I'm a better car driver by learning to ride a motorbike because you're far more aware, you're far more observant. Is there anything you can suggest that they can do to re-educate car drivers to make them more aware? Because it's that vulnerability again.
Yeah, I mean, with say driving a car, as you say, I did the advanced training on motorcycles. As a result of that, I'm pretty sure I'm a better car driver, even though I've not done an advanced car driving course. The reality is, though, that this is the way I think about it anyway. Anybody's free to disagree with me. This is not mag policy. This is me going through the thought process, so if you like, is that ultimately driving and using the roads, the main problem is a psychological issue. What Vision Zero has done is effectively put people into silos and says, right, these are car drivers, they act like this. These are motorcyclists, they act like that. Not bearing in mind the fact that tomorrow I'm going to be in a car. So I'm the same person with the same psychology. So my view is that to get the psychology right, we've got to take the mode of transport out of the discussion. If we can't make the argument logically for all road users, then we shouldn't be making it for any of them. And this again, it's like when it comes down to the cycling infrastructure. If it works for cyclists, that's great, but does it work for everybody else? That question doesn't get asked. So what we're obviously pushing for revisions of the motorcycle licensing regime, but I'm still very much stuck in but what's the evidence base of what changes are going to help? We haven't actually got any evidence to base on. Is a rider on a CBT more or less safe than a rider with a full license? Now, logically, you would hope that a full license holder is safer than a CBT rider, but a CBT rider has to renew his CBT every 2 years. Once you've got a motorcycle license, you don't have to renew it, so you stop learning. So which person is in the better off? Yeah, and again, that applies to car drivers. So my thinking is that we need to look at the entire structure of licensing on the roads, but again, it needs to be not mode specific. So you should be able to find that the route into motorcycling is exactly the same as it is for a car. As we know, to get a driving license in a car, there's basically 3 steps. If you look at the DFT's website, it says there's 3 steps. Look at the process for getting a motorcycle license. It's a flow chart spread across 5 pages of A4. So, it's vastly more complex and more difficult, and therefore more expensive. So, we've got to find a way of balancing it. I don't profess to know exactly what the best answer is, but we've got to be in a position where we can accept that changes do need to be made. If we can get that argument across the line, then we're in a position to start changing things properly. What I don't want to do is just do the knee-jerk reaction and say, yeah, well, we'll change this. We don't know if it's going to make it better. We've got no way of checking if it's going to make it better, but we'll have achieved something. That's not necessarily the best way of going about it, is it?
No, because it's almost like shutting the door after the horse is bolted. You know, and it's working out a proactive approach rather than knee-jerk, and I totally agree with you. Because it's almost like motorcyclists have been demonised, put in a category, rather than just taking everyone, you know, it's the same level approach. And I totally agree with you on that. But it's been really interesting talking to you today, Colin. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Thank you.